29th of December 2024. Hope you're all doing well. And this Sunday night, always takes me a minute to get up and running. Some sad news tonight. Gaza is gone. Israel is still around. I'm Dana. You can call in to these live shows 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. We're in Canada. Hope you're having a great night so far. This headline, this was 2014, nothing's changed. This is a Zionist soldier. I killed 13 Palestinian children today, says a sniper. Boys and girls, I would assume. But imagine bragging about that. Imagine a society that condones it, that accepts that, that encourages that relishes that takes pride in that, and yet calls themselves victims. Imagine the disconnect of reality you have to live in to be one of those types of people. One of those kind of people I think is a crime in its own, isn't it? I don't understand. I don't think we're supposed to. That mentality. This is a recent video a few days ago. There's nothing left to Gaza. It's been turned to dust. Have you ever seen videos of this for Israel? Have you ever seen any kind of damage like this in Israel? Look at the arrogance to put their flag up. Imagine their contempt for you. And they call themselves soldiers with 4,000 tanks and jet fighters and helicopters and drones and satellites and navies. And well, every military member is equipped. They have thousands and thousands of doctors waiting to operate on them if they get injured. And you're fighting somebody who has nothing, and you call yourself a soldier. It's coward, I think, is the appropriate word. But what would happen if Israel looked like that? What would happen if somebody from Iran, if a soldier from Iran said, I killed 13 Israeli children today? I don't know how they can look at themselves in the mirror. I just don't understand that mentality. They live in a total fantasy land where they're a militarized society. They don't produce anything good for the rest of the world. All they have is the military-industrial complex. They make weapons, a misery machine, right? Meant to harm other people and children and animals. And now they erased their prisoners. They slaughtered all their prisoners that they can slaughter. They erased all their homes, their lands. They erased every library, every university, every hospital, every school, all the infrastructure, all the water filtration, all the electricity generation. And they've been keeping them as prisoners and using them as slaves for almost 60 years. Stole all their land in increments, and what they didn't steal, they just went ahead and destroyed. And they call themselves heroes. They call themselves humans. They call themselves victims for some reason in order to trick you and deceive you, manipulate you, and coerce you into supporting them. But they can't look anybody in the eyes when they're doing it. Only themselves, maybe. I don't I don't quite understand that. Yeah, you got Dana. Michael. Hello? I don't know. They hung up. How do they call themselves heroes? How does that work? And they call themselves snipers. They're not taking out soldiers. They're not taking out Hamas. They're shooting children. And they posted a photo of themselves. Hello? They call themselves snipers. Hello? They're not taking out soldiers. They're not taking out Hamas. Hello? They're shooting children. Posted a photo of themselves. Hello? Hello?
Oh, Dana.
Hi there.
Hi, it's Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Thank you so much for letting me back on.
Yeah. How are you doing?
A little bit drunk.
Is that right?
It's the holidays.
Yeah, that's the holidays. I'm trying to fix some equipment here in the background.
I was the one who hung up because the way the phone put through, I didn't understand. So that's
yeah,
why.
no, I know. There's a delay, right, on your end?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Got you. What do you think of the slaughter of Gaza?
I love it.
The slaughter of Gaza?
Yep.
You like that?
Yep.
Why?
I think Israel needs to have a new homeland in Gaza and also Lebanon. This is way off topic. This is not my phone. I know we disagree on these things, but...
So you don't think it's a crime to shoot 13 children in one day?
Not if they're terrorists.
So children are terrorists?
Yeah, yeah.
How come?
Well, they're future soldiers. I mean, look at these people. They're insane.
Really? Why?
They're jihad and crap like that.
Have you ever been there?
Thankfully, no.
How do you know they're terrorists?
Look at them. Look at what they're doing.
They've been locked down for 60 years. What would you do? Would you try to escape? Would you try to resist? If you got no water, no food, you don't got no children toys, you don't have no employment, you can't have a bank, you can't go to school, you can't leave the country. I think you're a fucking idiot, personally.
Oh, well, that's okay. Thank you for still talking. I don't think you're a fucking idiot.
But you're definitely an idiot, man. Take care. That's what I get for letting them back on, don't I? That's shocking that somebody can be like that. Why do that, I wonder? What's the point of that? What's the point of calling in and calling children that never done nothing to him or to Israel? Israel children are all raised up. They got weapons, they got drones, they got jets, they got tanks. The Palestinians never done this to Israel. That's what I mean. Like they don't have any concept of reality. They just regurgitate what they see on TV. There's no concept of reality whatsoever. And then they can't justify their words. Just the ad hominem that they're terrorists. That's what they used to call the Jews in the ghettos in Germany was terrorists, right? Because they fought for their freedom, allegedly. But nobody else is allowed to fight for their freedom because it's absurd to call in and say that. Pumped hydro could deliver 100% renewable electricity. Pumped hydro could deliver 100% electricity. So, rather than nuclear, you can do what they call water batteries, where you build two reservoirs, you fill up the first one, the bottom one, and with excess electricity, you pump water to the top one. And so when the sun is not shining and the wind's not blowing, the wind's always blowing a couple of miles up the coast, so if you spread your wind turbines out, you always got wind. It's absurd to suggest the wind doesn't blow. I mean, there's doldrums, certainly, but as you go along 10, 15 miles away, there's lots of wind. Deadly prefectures. 14 prefectures, the food was banned for 55 years. Not because the windmills broke down or the solar power, gas, oil, or coal plants broke down, but because an idiotic moron nuclear power plant broke down. Compressed air energy storage. So you can actually compress air into caverns. So you dig just tunnels. Instead of pumping water from a lower to an upper pond during periods of excess power, you compress air and you store it in caverns you dig underground, caves basically. Or, abandoned mines or whatever. But imagine picking up 30 million one-ton bags, just a tiny fraction of land, harvesting food right alongside of it. Your food is banned by 55 countries for over a decade in 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima prefecture. And then coming out and apologizing, not apologizing. Startup pumps for compressed air wind storage. These are windmills that actually pump air underground into caverns and caves. That's amazing technology right there. With excess energy. So there's lots of ways to store energy. That's just one of them. You got 30 million one-ton bags, and people stopped paying attention, so they stopped picking up the bags. That was only 3% of the land. But the industry is so sadistic and so demonic, it's actually grown food right alongside of millions of one-ton bags of radiation in a nuclear wasteland and then shipping that to market. If you don't think that's insane, you should hang out with a caller we had earlier. China breaks ground on the world's largest compressed air energy storage facility. China breaks ground. This was a story from a few days ago, Christmas Eve. And so this is one of those examples we were just talking about. Now, I mean, there is more than this. There's huge examples of it out there. This is another one where they're using salt caverns and compressing air energy for storage into the salt caverns. They're harvesting the salt. They're harvesting the salt more than any other compressed air energy storage facility in the world. 2.8 gigawatts. Typically, a gigawatt is a million people. So 2.8 million hours of storage. And they can do that 330 discharge cycles a year. I mean, that's incredible, right? By leveraging existing salt caverns for energy storage. So they're just taking old salt caverns, compressing air down to it. They're taking the heat from that, and they're storing that in salt. And then when they're ready to use the compressed air, they can expand it more quicker by using the heat that they recovered from the compression. So it's very efficient. But then you got the idiot Japan, the hateful, disgusting Japan. sadistic monster of Japan, growing food in a nuclear wasteland to murder you and your loved ones with. Imagine growing food in a nuclear wasteland and then calling themselves humans. It's absurd, isn't it? Hang on there. Imagine food's banned in 55 countries for a decade. And the people that had put those bans in place were removed and replaced with the pro-nuclear community. Nuclear power is helping to drive climate crisis. This is a good story. Nuclear power, apart from destroying the biodiversity throughout its life cycle, produces up to 37 times the CO2 emissions of renewable energy sources, owing partly to the mining and refining of uranium. And the impact of this process on people and environment is not included in the rationale for nuclear power in the United Kingdom. And has the Confederation of the British industry got its head in the sands, or is the record level of carbon-intensive concrete just poured at the Hinkley C nuclear site was enough to build a sidewalk to Rome and back? Only the best. So it produces up to 37 times the CO2 emissions of renewable energy sources. That's what nuclear produces. $30 million one-ton bags. And they haven't stopped growing food in a nuclear wasteland for a single day. That's the definition of terrorist, if I ever heard of it. And the U.S. military is a major polluter, but greening the military is a false solution. You can't green a military. In any given year, the United States military pumps more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than industrial countries. In 2017, the Pentagon's total greenhouse gas emissions were greater than the so-called greenhouse gas emissions of Sweden, Denmark, and Portugal. But the so-called carbon, you can't have food, insects, birds, plants, animals. You can't have life on a planet without carbon, because all life is carbon. Carbon doesn't travel very far from its source. I'm a bit shocked if somebody would call in and say it's okay to kill children. Clearly they should have been killed when they were a child. It's just unconscionable that anybody would call in and justify that. So gas, oil, and coal emissions only travel a few miles away from the source. The only emissions, this is reactor 3 for instance, one of the many reactors that melted down. So you can see to your left, the bottom model is 26 days of radioactive fallout covering the entire planet. Gas, oil, and coal doesn't have that. And the radioactive emissions, you're looking at an invisible snowstorm of man-made atoms. And just a single atom will make you sick eventually. Your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells and builds a sarcophagus around it. We call it a tumor, right? So the anthropogenic man-made atoms, you got an invisible snowstorm that never goes away. And by the way, it never stops coming out because it's a nuclear meltdown. That model is only based on less than a month of emissions. And so the atoms, each atom is pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. Imagine a snowstorm that after 26 days covers the entire planet. It never stops snowing. The snow never melts. Never goes away. And bioaccumulates over 80 years. It continues to do that. That's what radiation has done to the planet, but you can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up. And so you have invisible snowstorms. Carbon doesn't make plumes that covers the very top one, let alone the bottom one. And any carbon that lands gets absorbed into plants and trees and insects and the biota and the ecosystem. It's beautiful. It's wonderful stuff. That's the cycle of life, is carbon. So in order to cover up the nuclear industry's emissions, they blame the stuff that makes the world better. And you should hate the industry for doing that, by the way. The U.S. operates more than 80 military installations around the world. You think about Russia, think about China, think about Pakistan, think about India, think about idiot Israel, moron Israel. Literally the stupidest people on the planet. Maintaining an expansive military sprawl requires significant investments in carbon-intensive. The majority of people in Israel are not even from Israel. They're from other countries. They went there because they get $50,000 for becoming a dual citizen. Pure greed, eh? Significant investments in carbon-intensive infrastructures and gas-guzzling equipment. Fossil fuels are required to power the bases, also to fuel the non-stop movement of the troops and supplies. The ships themselves are insane how much fuel they go through and how many they actually have. Jet fuel is the military's most heavily used fuel. Each area emissions produce hundreds of tons of CO2 pollutions in the upper atmospheres on top of that. And just one of the military jets, the B-52 Stratofortress. Let's do the math on that one, actually. Consumes as much fuel in 1 hour, and not in a 12-hour flight, but 1 hour, as the average car driver uses in 7 years. So let's do the math. So you got, say the average car uses 3.5 gallons a day, right? So 3.5 times 365 times 7 years times 12 hours. It's 107,000 gallons. I'm sure it's a lot more than that in the reality of it is. That's just a 12-hour shift. Did I get that right? It's absurd, isn't it? Yeah, that looks about right. It's an absurd amount of fuel. The military budget in 2020 was 272 times larger than the federal budget for energy efficiency and renewable energy. So the budget to go out and destroy the biosphere, the ecosystem, is 272 times larger than the budget for renewable and energy efficiencies. Very disappointing. Like Japan, it's very disappointing. Still growing food in a nuclear wasteland. How to store excess wind power underwater. So wind, you can put a system underwater that's not very expensive where you can store excess energy. In 2020, enough electricity to supply more than 1 million homes a year was wasted due to a lack of storage. And a Dutch startup has developed what's called an ocean battery. It's not an actual battery, but it does the same work, right? Which stores energy. It's just big tubes that store energy. Underground reservoir. Excess electricity from the system pumps water from an underground reservoir into tough, flexible bladders that sit on the seabed. You can think of them like big bicycle inner tubes, and then that energy is extracted. But then you look at a single nuclear site has contaminated the entire planet, every insect, every bird, every human, every animal, every mammal. Hydrostor plans a 400 megawatt, 3200 megawatt compressed air energy storage in the United States. It's a 50-year life system, uses no toxic material, is emission-free, can provide rotational inert in support of grid stabilities. And the plant named Penchco Energy Storage Center will be able to deliver 400 megawatts of electricity for 8 hours, and which is peak, will cover the peak power each day. And it's physically the size of some of California's largest fossil fuel power plants. Every nuclear power plant needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to it to run it. When Japan, so 55 countries banned the food for a decade from 14 prefectures. Now, when I say countries, I mean countries. I don't mean Canada. Canada's not really a country. It was captured by the nuclear industries in the 50s. On June the 14th, 2011, Canada removed all restrictions on food from the nuclear wasteland and everywhere else in Japan, while 55 of the major countries banned it for a decade, which meant that the food they were growing, they couldn't ship anywhere, can only be shipped to Canada. And Canada right now, you're trying to get a doctor is almost impossible because the whole medical system is flooded all day with sick people because they ate food from a nuclear wasteland for almost a decade straight. They're still eating it today, but they were eating the most deadly food. It's really something because in Canada we're seeing, like, there's a community not very far from me, probably 10 miles away, not even 10 miles away, where 2 years ago I covered a story that in a 1 week period, it was 5 people under the age of 50, some in their 30s, were outdoors walking or in their garden, dropped dead of alleged heart attacks. But we know radiation causes massive amounts of heart attacks. AP journalists felt a massive explosion from the number 3 reactor. And this reactor, you can actually watch the videos. You'll see the fuel pool and the reactor cores ejected out of the buildings and fall back down onto the site, for instance, some of it. Which means you can't get back on that site. This is why we don't see nuclear scientists or nuclear academics reporting from the site. It's only the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. And the explosion was so great they felt the explosion 25 miles away. The mentally handicapped are working at the nuclear meltdowns, and they're also often given second-hand paper suits. TEPCO confirmed the steam coming up from underground of reactor number 1, from the China syndrome, was at lethal doses, and which was 20% more than in June, which was lethal doses. So 4.7 sieverts, they would abandon the site because we got videos of it. They would abandon the site because the whole site would get lost in steam. But you need the right conditions to see the steam, right? You won't see it in the summertime, for instance. Lethal doses coming out of the ground in the form of steam. The mentally disabled are working at the Fukushima Daiichi, says journalist. Many men are forced to go to the plant. Homeless are treated like disposable people. Tokyo Vice Governor suggested a Fukushima draft. And remember, they had 50 nuclear plants there, right? They didn't get volunteers from the other nuclear power plants. They were using the most vulnerable of society. The homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, which includes Canadians and Americans. We all Japanese must face it. Sale of foreign Geiger counters was banned. Even a despicable, disgusting parasite, Forbes, said it was outrageous. And homeless people are being sold to companies and put to work at Fukushima radiation. and that the government's funded shelter supplying gangsters with workers. So imagine working in a nuclear wasteland right alongside of nuclear meltdowns. Like if you took a nuclear employee from a typical nuclear company and try to bring them there, they will kill you. They'll choke you with the seatbelt. They'll claw your eyes out of your head. You could never get them there. It won't happen. They literally will jump out of the car. But yet, this disgusting parasite industry, this revolting maggot. This is an industry of maggots, just like Israel, industry of maggots. UN official astounded homeless are taken to work in Fukushima, ready to die. At the end of the month, they're left with no pay. And they were making an average of $14 a day on top of that. That's what they're averaging a day to work the most important and dangerous job in human history. Because nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, the pro-nuclear communities, you can never get them to go there. They're not going there. They're cowards, not heroes. They're zeros, like the phone caller we had at the beginning. They end up in debt to employers after food and housing fees are deducted. They only make $14 a day to work in a nuclear wasteland, eventually get sick and die from it. Or they die that day. Anybody who worked there died. That's the Medusa again, Reactor 4, Reactor 3, Reactor 2, and Reactor 1. But Reactor 3 is different Medusa because it was a plutonium mixed oxide fuel facility. Former Prime Minister, half the people in Japan were close to being evacuated after Fukushima. Half the people in Japan. So what they decided to do was say that Fukushima didn't melt down. That's the only reason that they didn't evacuate half the people in Japan. So if your power plant breaks down in your country, you might have to evacuate half your country. But don't worry, the pro-nuclear community will step in and won't let you do it. Better to sacrifice half the people in your country and half the planet who eats the food from that nuclear wasteland than it is to give the nuclear industry a black eye. Forbes, we already covered that one. Think about, this is Reactor 2 detonation, or Reactor 1 detonation. Interview in Fukushima, a lot of police are dead. I think it was 2015 it came out, there was over 300 police officers that were guarding the abandoned communities, banks and jewelry stores and everything else. They were on the outskirts of the communities. Over 300 have died of kidney failure, heart attacks, and cancers. When radiation workers die, they're marked as missing. Official 311 notebook. Concerned half of Japan to be covered in nuclear waste, and 60 and older should be prepared to die. Why should anybody be prepared to die at your power plant when it breaks down? Like there's an agenda from 195 countries that has signed on to this corporate, this misery military-industrial complex known as United Nations. And they're exterminating all the species, not just humans. And they're doing it through radiation. Almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. That doesn't terrify you. You need to hang around for a few shows. Japan Dr. Tokyo should no longer be inhabited. Everyone here is a victim of Fukushima. Tokyo, 240 kilometers away. People are truly suffering, bleeding under the skin, urinary hemorrhaging. Children blood tests started changing last year. Radiation as a weapon of mass destruction. There was 865,000 extra cancers, excess cancers in the first year. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody's going to be diagnosed. Cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiency or injury or illness. There's heart problems and liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. Your immune system is compromised. You're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign are now lethal to you, like just a common cold. Because your immune system is compromised, because you've been poisoned. What Japan is doing, there is no excuses. There is no excuse to be this evil. To grow food in a nuclear wasteland, there is no excuses for that. The fact they picked up 30 million one-ton bags quantifies everything I'm saying. The nuclear industry is your enemy, period. And it's the enemy of every species on this planet, period. It's not up for debate. Top radiation experts, 50 atoms a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. You can put 200 million atoms, and each atom does a Becquerel, which is a decay, which is not a decay, it's an explosion. It could explode every second for 1 billion years. How can you call that a decay? And so these explosions are at the speed of light. They wreck your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells. Your body tries to repair all of that every second and attack the source every second for the rest of your life. You can't keep up with that every second. So you have an incredibly compromised immune system because you'll flood that area with white blood cells, not just from your spleen, but from all your joints. You still can't keep up with it. And when you cause irreversible lesions in your vital organs, and so think of an atom where you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, and each one of them is going to pulse energy. These are man-made only. Each one is going to pulse energy almost at the speed of light every second. Cesium-137 will pulse for 600 feet. This is the enemy of every species on the planet, and the urgency is very real. The fact that they're growing food in a nuclear wasteland is insane. Radioactive pollen, Tokyo, up to 2,000 grains inhaled in 1 cubic meter of air. Inhaled. It doesn't mean there's 2,000 grains per cubic meter of air. It just means if you're in a cubic meter of air, you're going to inhale at least 2,000 grains. There could be 2 million grains, radioactive pollen. Japan says the area 150 kilometers from Fukushima plant is as radioactive as areas close to the meltdown. We know this because even past Tokyo, like in Chiba and other places, including Tokyo, the food was banned by 55 countries for a decade. Right? Not just the Ishikawa prefectures on the west coast, not just Fukushima, not just Chiba or Tokyo, but 14 prefectures. Surges in airborne radioactive releases has gone on for years at Fukushima. Exceeded 25,000 times the normal levels, and that the radiation alarm sounded for hours at a time at the plant, and extensive areas being impacted. 25,000 times normal levels. There is no normal level. It's all man-made levels, right? They have poisoned our planet, our air, for 1 billion years. Radiation health specialists, children with over 11 atoms a kilogram of cesium start to see heart problems. You put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. So how are you supposed to avoid 11? And it's impossible to eat anything on the planet with less than 100. If you're getting any food from Japan, you're talking about thousands of atoms a kilogram, man-made atoms. And you only need 1 or 2 to eventually end up getting sick for the rest of your life. And children are actually 1,000 times more vulnerable than an adult. And insects are 1 billion times more vulnerable. X-ray-like images show how radioactivity is spread throughout the bodies of Fukushima wildlife. X-ray-like images shows that radioactivity is spread throughout the bodies of Fukushima wildlife. So they can find it by doing X-rays in the insects and animals and stuff like that. But it's true also for plants. Now, 35.8% of the Fukushima children have thyroid tumors. Your thyroid tumors are 2 centimeters, and the thyroid gland for a child is about 2 by 2 centimeters. For an adult, it's 5 by 3 centimeters. And what that means is that they're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their life. But it also means if you're seeing those attributes, then you can expect to be producing them to produce radioactive stem cells for the rest of their life. So a developing child or insect or bird or mammal, animals or whatever, if they're producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells as they're developing, do you really think that is going to turn out good? You got 13,646 out of 38,000. Pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million. A percent of a percent. So 13,646 with tumors. Pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million. So you're talking about 358,000 out of a million when you go through a million children. That's what you're going to expect to find. That's what the study is suggesting. I couldn't help but feel pity for the trees. X-ray-like images shows the spread of radioactivity is equivalents of miscarriages, stillbirths, malformations. So not just the insects, but the plants are all showing catastrophic contamination, which is permanent. Fukushima plume model shows 1 million atoms a kilogram over the west coast of the United States and Canada after the reactor's explosions. This was the Xenon-133, I believe. That's on the ground. You can't have one without many, many, many other isotopes. There's not just a plume of Xenon-133 going that way and a plume of cesium going that way. If you got a plume of anything, it's a plume of everything. And the radioactive material from the reactors is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. It's greater than from any work of man other than the atomic bomb. It's like explosions going off in the cells and blowing holes in the chromosomes and the DNA. It's permanent, and these are mutated too on top of that. So guess what happens? The United States was hit with an extremely large peak of radioactive fallout that is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, and a significant amount of plutonium released for months. Well, the biggest byproduct of the radioactive meltdowns is curium isotopes. And curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. How do you think that's going to work out for all the birds and bees and insects and trees? Map shows Fukushima fallout in the United States. Radiation doses in the Northeast and the Great Lakes was equal to the West Coast of the United States. And I've done research expeditions for 6 years on the West Coast. Radioactive Xenon-133 in Washington was 450,000 times above detection levels and persisted for weeks at the University of Texas. Did I mention that it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison? When you put all this together, what do you get? You get everybody sick, right? 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131 per liter fell on the U.S. per liter sustained, which happens to be 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Cesium remains dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor. But you can't have cesium without all the other isotopes, which every one of them are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. The Fukushima radiation is still circling the globe, and the levels are consistently rising and falling in a 40-day cycle. And this headline here, 220 million atoms per liter of radioactive rainfall in radioactive fallout. I mean, these are forever numbers. And to make matters even worse, the stupid Japanese, the moron, dummy, the stupidest people in human history, are the Japanese, are actually burning radioactive debris all around the country. They're shipping it across the country and burning it. And those plumes will carry it right across the entire planet in just 20 to 30 days. All the models, I mean, like, really, how do you get that stupid? These are dirty bombs by the kilogram. This is a 239 dispersal based on 20 days and 21 days. This is TEPCO's numbers. This is a radioactive dispersal of the Neptunium-239 with a 2.4 day where they changed to plutonium. And the plutonium is 24,000 year half-lives. There's 10 half-lives. That's a 20-day model. The common spent fuel pool, which had 6,375 spent fuel assemblies, it had a lot more than that because they don't have a deep geological repository of any type anywhere, let alone Japan. And so all the fuel was stored at the top of the buildings, and some of it was in the common spent fuel pool, which is probably double that. And the common spent fuel pool was right behind Reactor 4. And Reactor 4 doesn't exist. And despite that the media came out and claimed they're in the pool, it actually doesn't exist. And what could compel all the medias, the major medias worldwide, to come out and claim that they got the fuel out of the pool when the building doesn't even exist? Because of the stuff I'm showing you. Japan had an earthquake. There was only two medias that covered it. Right off Fukushima. So how vulnerable does that reactor to your left look? What do you think is going to happen when an earthquake close by rattles that? Big emissions? If that's what you think, then you're right. The quake originated off the Fukushima prefecture at a depth of around 40 kilometers. It's interesting because they don't give you the distance off the coast. According to the utility firms, no abnormalities were found in nuclear power plants in the region after the tremor. These are earthquakes, not tremors. And so Fukushima's up right by that X. And shallow, very, very shallow, 40 kilometers. It's very shallow. We're expecting a doozy over the next couple of days, particularly in the Noto Ishikawa Prefecture, Noto Peninsula. Last year on January the 1st, the Noto earthquake was a 3,000 to 4,000 year fault line ruptured. Why don't you tell us how far off the coast it is? They're the only country besides Taiwan that does that. Or they won't tell you how far off the coastline it is. And the reason that's important is because the continental plates, the tectonic plates rather, will do that every so often, right? And that's what causes the big massive tsunamis. And so we know where the tectonic plates are off the coastline. And so if they don't tell you where it's to, then why are they hiding it? What do they got to hide? Why not tell you if they got nothing to hide? I seen over 300 counts per minute earlier in the stream. Which is a crazy number, right? Strong shaking felt in Miyagi, Fukushima prefectures. So for the tsunami, or for the earthquake to hit interior, where the strong shaking is described, it has to go right past Fukushima nuclear meltdowns first. And it was shocking that nobody covered it, only two medias. Off the coastline of Fukushima, a depth of 40 kilometers. Yeah, but how far off the coastline? Specifying a tsunami warning has not been triggered. Well, the tsunami warning is only be triggered when it's at a certain distance where the tectonic plates are. South Korea's parliament votes yes to impeach interim President Han. He just replaced Yoon, right? Disgusting Yoon. There was 179 killed in a plane crash in South Korea airport. That took all the media's attention away from Yoon and Yan. Convenient, isn't it? He didn't even put his wheels down. He didn't even put his reverse thrusters on. Those planes can be flown remotely too, right? You know that. That's a great thing to have happen when you're interim president and your president have been, and at the same time, the won, the dollar in South Korea started to nosedive, and then everything got covered up right away by that thing. So they have impeached acting interim president Han Duck-soo. That's such a great name, isn't it? Finding him guilty of actively participating in insurrections when his predecessor, Yoon, declared martial law. Yoon, of course, had said that he denied there was a radiation releases in Fukushima. In fact, he called it a leak. He denied there was any emissions whatsoever from Fukushima. This was before he was elected. Corruption. Speaking of corruption, Rob Moore. Really, I mean, it's to the point where we got to bring back public executions. Is nuclear power green energy? No, of course not. Origins in the age of ongoing radioactive contamination of soil near La Hague reprocessing plant in France. Look at the emissions. Plutonium, americium, strontium. In fact, La Hague and Sellafield and Donneray in the United Kingdom have been accused of contaminating the Arctic with the emissions from the reprocessing disease factories, which is an abomination. I think the people at the nuclear plants are the evilest people I've ever come across. The pro-nuclear community are the evilest people I've ever come across. What they're doing, and the lies they tell, there's no excuses. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Congress and parliaments and the Diet in Japan don't have the authority to make it illegal either. Only the non-regulatory agencies, the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, has the authority to make it illegal. But they don't, like, Congress and parliaments have the authority to make thousands of chemicals illegal, but they can't make radiation. If you make a radiation illegal to poison you, they can't murder your loved ones in a hospital, can they? Science and trans science and radiation risk assessment. Child cancers around nuclear fuel processing plants at Sellafield. I mean, there's so many studies out there, it's hard to comprehend how the author, Rob the Scumbag Moore, who is, let me keep going here. Is nuclear power good for our climate? The answer to this is compared to the alternative, almost certainly a yes, he says. That's simply not true. In contrast to coal or natural gas power plants, nuclear plants do not produce carbon dioxide. Really. All nuclear plants need two gas, oil, and coal plants just to run their mass of water, not counting everything else. Like, each reactor needs 4,500 tons of water, 1 million gallons each minute. So think of a 1-ton pickup truck full of water. So the reactors, each reactor needs 4,500 1-ton pickup trucks. So imagine you're stood on the side of the road, you got 4,500 1-ton pickup trucks passing you every minute because you got to get water into the reactor or it's going to melt down. How much energy does it take to make 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks go past you every minute? You need 2 gas, oil, or coal plants dedicated to the nuclear plant because it can't run on its own power. And if you lose power, the plants will melt down. Hanford cleanup costs will triple, and that's the best case scenario. It might be 10 times more than that. So at worst, it could be $677 billion. Oh, and 300 years. Is nuclear power good for the public health? Back to the stupid. The question is more tricky. Well, why is it tricky? Downwinders, thousands of miles away from nuclear tests, were poisoned, had their life destroyed. Do you really think being close to a nuclear plant whose fuel pools are still splitting atoms is somehow going to be any safer? And on the other hand, nuclear powered plant does not produce sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, particulate matter, and mercury emitted by burning fossil fuel. Every nuclear power plant needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants to run. So yes, just because the plants are not next door to it don't mean it's not happening down the transmission lines. And that the emissions from a nuclear power plant fuel pools are catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. And this means nuclear plants are not associated with respiratory and cardiovascular problems. Good God, man. The biggest problem with emissions from the fuel pools is heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory problems, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia has skyrocketed. Cancer epidemic started in the 70s because of all the nuclear detonations into the environment as that permeated into the food chain and people into the water. Downwinders impacted by nuclear testing. So nuclear plants are hemorrhaging radiation. While direct exposure to radioactive material associated with higher cancer, not just cancer, to only acknowledge cancer, and you're supposed to be a journalist, is the lowest form of life conceivable. That's Rob Moore is the lowest form of life conceivable. There is very little evidence living near a nuclear plant does the same due to containment. Whenever you hear these words, there's very little evidence. I'm reminded of Harvard or MIT presentation after Fukushima happened within the first couple of weeks. And they said there was very little evidence. And I can show you just tens of thousands of studies that clearly shows that there's an incredible amount of evidence. Why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Any idea? Because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation up the tall, skinny stack. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Each fuel pool is evaporating because of the isotopes. The water is boiling because of the isotopes so the fuel rods have trillions of microscopic cracks in it. That's why you take them out after 14 months or so, because they're so fragile. If they crack open, you can't use the reactor anymore. So they have to take it out before it cracks, right? Excuse me, my apologies. So they're splitting atoms. This is how you boil water for 1 million homes. You're splitting atoms. Once you take it out of the reactor, you don't stop splitting atoms. You just don't have any containment anymore. And so you have around 120,000 liters per fuel pool. Each reactor has 2 fuel pools at the top of the buildings typically. And each pool is boiling off 120,000 liters. That's 250,000 liters per building. Each liter is going to have hundreds of trillions, if not more, of the worst isotopes conceivable. They're boiled up the tall, skinny stack. And a lot of that is going to land in the farms. And then these are very high productive areas, and they ship the food out to your supermarkets to poison you and your friends and your families. And they have endless studies. We're talking, they got millions and millions and millions of studies on how the food sucks up radiation. So do you really think that they don't know what they're doing? Right? And you got all the evidence of how harmful it is to do it. Do you really, like, this is why I got a poll tonight asking the question, is nuclear power the dirtiest, most resource intensive, the most dangerous, and have the evilest people employed? Clearly, that's what's going on. That's not up for debate. They have all the studies, how do I explain this? So you got a volcano that's active every 3 years. And so the real estate agent takes you up to the volcano during an inactive year and shows you this plot of land that's staked out. And he says, she's going for a bargain. And he says, but we have the volcano goes off every 3 years. And they're like, that's okay. We're going to buy it and build a house and raise the kids here. So they buy it, and the wife has a couple of kids, and then the volcano blows up and kills them. And their family then wants to sue the real estate company for selling them the land. But he told them, right, there's going to be a volcano, and so in the next couple of years, it happens every 3 years. Growing food in a nuclear wasteland is the same thing, where you know they're going to get killed from consuming it eventually. It's going to be heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. It's the same thing for Japan. They're growing food in a nuclear wasteland. How do you quantify that? Right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation they picked up, how do you quantify that? How do you justify that? Oh, excuse me. I'm busted up again. My back is shot. Since I fell a month ago or more, I guess now, is it? I can't do anything with my back losing it. I'm waiting for snow because I'm going to be out on the trail researching the extinction event that's going on. In desperation, we blew all of we got and got a Skidoo, a decent one. It's a great Skidoo, fuel injected, liquid cooled, 4-stroke. It's got 2,350 miles on it. Perfect track, studded track. Very, very quiet. I was like, it's only 1/3, 1/4 as loud as my quad. It's crazy, eh? And so I'm really looking forward to that. The plastic on it is not even faded. I'm gonna treat that over the next couple of days when the weather is decent. And but it shows you how well it was taken care of when you see that. We got to get out and research the species, and we're going to do that as much as we can, every single day we can once the snow starts, which is typically somewhere in January, and then it lasts until, say, March. There's very little evidence that living near a nuclear plant does the same due to containment of the energy. There's no containment. A 23% higher incidence is of childhood leukemia within 60 kilometers of the facility. To say there's very little evidence, like, these are people should have their arms pulled off, so they can't write anything ever again. Legally, of course. How low doses of radiation causes heart diseases and strokes. Child's risk of cancer from radiation is actually 1,000+ times higher than an adult with the same exposures, because their thyroid and their stem cells become radioactive, and then you know how bad that's going to turn out ultimately. So it's much worse than an adult, see? Does the same due to containment. There is no containment. Once you take the fuel out of the reactor and put it in the fuel pool, there's no longer a containment. You got the same amount of atoms you would use to power 1 million homes, boil water to power 1 million homes, are released all day long, every second, into the environment, which is typically surrounded by farms. But it doesn't mean that it's all going to land right there. This stuff is going to circle the entire planet. Living near a coal power plant or natural gas plant is much more hazardous to your health than living near a nuclear power plant. See, this is a typical Rod Adams. And then you talk about nano nuclear energy, eh? NANO Nuclear Energy, a nuclear energy technology company that doesn't have a product. They don't have a reactor. They don't have a license into the regulatory agencies. They're around $14 million cash. And because they stole people's life savings with stocks, right? And they got a lot of help. In fact, I produced a video. My last video that I'd done was on Friday night. Really articulates how that played out. So they just acquired $8.5 million in cash through an auction process of ultra-safe nuclear. Ultra-safe nuclear is having a fire sale because they're going bankrupt. And ultra-safe nuclear is one of the companies that stalked me for a long time. Called me up and harassed me constantly. Probably because I went out shit on them every chance I got. The MMR energy system is zero carbon nuclear power plant. But it doesn't exist. You don't have a license to prove that it can exist. You don't have an actual system built to prove that. And to call it zero carbon is the absurdest thing conceivable, and it's the most resource intensive industry in the human history. There's nothing more resource intensive than nuclear. And in order to do that little trick to even to work, they're going to be using plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is the most insidious fuel conceivable. It's a scumbag industry. It's an industry that attracts the scumbag of the scumbags out there. They say the system being demonstrated at Canadian nuclear laboratories is not. There is no system. They don't have an application in. The first small modular reactor to enter the formal licensing review phase with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. If it was true, they wouldn't have went bankrupt. The investors would have come out and kept it afloat. Because the nuclear industry is notorious at doing that. And I would have known about it. We covered this 5 days a week, every week for over a decade straight. I've been at it a lot longer than that. I've been at it for almost 23 years. But this particular show has been running for almost a decade straight. My website is 11 years old, right? We've been doing the same show. The acquired technology will also enable NANO Nuclear to refine and better tailor its offerings. So NANO just spent $8 million on an auction for patents that they can't use because they don't have any monetary. They need billions of dollars to bring anything to fruition, like an experimental model. They don't have it. So by buying this, they're hoping that the stock market now will trick people into spending their life savings, because every 2 or 3 weeks that crashes, and then they steal the money, cash in. They acquired the stocks that are now for sale dirt cheap. Andreeva Bay cleanup, which is the former Soviet Union nuclear submarine refueling place, was abandoned for 28 years. Had their fuel pools were actually outdoors. Means it's splitting the atoms directly into the environment. Stillbirths among offsprings of male radiation workers at Sellafield nuclear reprocessing plant. Stillbirths among the offsprings of the male. What about the female? Radiation workers at Sellafield, one of the worst disease factors in human history. Let me show you something neat about Sellafield, if that's even possible. Just bear with me. It's worded, just bear with me. Here we go. think we got it. Well, we got something, but that's not what we're looking for. Hang on. I got a marked. I know I marked the folder so I can recognize it, but I can't remember what I marked it with. I just keep forgetting to relabel it. It's just because I got so much material. One more try. I got everything. UK cancer clusters. I had went and got satellite pictures. I just need one more. I don't know why I can't find it. Oh, that's a better way. Here we go. So Sellafield is up there, but look at all the farms. It's crazy, right? So like when you look at Sellafield site itself, look at the farms. But then think about when you took if you took a satellite picture. Now look at it. In fact, let me find I got the better pictures right there. I'll get that right away. Hopefully. I got it. It's right here. Now that I know, I could probably find it anytime. Here we go. So there's Sellafield, which is a reprocessing facility. There's 1,000 buildings there. They're all nuclear wasteland, every one of them. And so when you look at it up close, what do you see? And remember that these facilities are going to hemorrhage radiation 24 hours a day into the farms. And that's why we have this poll. Is nuclear power the dirtiest, most resource intensive, the most dangerous, and have the evilest people employed? Because you can't work there unless you're evil. That's the bottom line. The distribution of iodine-129 around West Valley, this New York City, is now an inactive nuclear fuel reprocessing facility. So they don't have as many farms because they got millions of people there to poison. Think about this one here. The most powerful nuclear detonation ever carried out by the United States, Castle Bravo, was equal to over 1,000 Nagasaki's. Because Nagasaki was a plutonium bomb, right? 1,000 Nagasaki's. But the Soviet Union was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the one time. So when people say, well, there's only 2,000 nuclear weapons detonated worldwide, thereabouts, remember, just between Castle Bravo and the Soviet Union Bomba, you're talking about 4,000 or 5,000 or so Nagasaki bombs going off at the one time. And Nagasaki qualifies as a nuclear bomb, don't it? If you look at the pictures of it, it more than qualifies, right? Look to Britain nuclear's veterans in the eye, Prime Minister, and tell them that, think about all the British and Americans and the Australians, New Zealanders, everybody else, soldiers that were used as human guinea pigs and then studied, and their children studied like lab rats for the rest of their lives. So to suggest that very little is known, these are not humans that say stuff like that. These are real-life monsters. Shocking state of the world's riskiest nuclear waste site. Huge pools of mysterious sludges, leaking silos of nuclear waste. And a lot of this stuff, they don't even know what's in the buildings anymore. The people that did know are long dead from cancer and heart problems and diseases. Think about this statement here. The nuclear submarine that was scuttled in the Arctic, where there's 18,000 dumps of nuclear waste in the Arctic, by the way. But one of the nuclear subs, the Dutch, was it the Dutch? And Russia done a study, and he said the nuclear submarine wouldn't rust for 1,000 years. Like, think about how friggin' evil you actually got to be to say something like that. Neither the submarine hull nor the reactor vessel will be destroyed by corrosion. Neither the submarine hull or the nuclear reactor that's sitting on the ocean floor is long since breached. It would have breached in about 2 years. It probably would have breached right away because it's so deep. Because you're talking about 14.28 pounds per square inch for every 33 feet atmospheric pressures. The Fed's fear electronic pulse would cause a meltdown of all nuclear power plants worldwide at one time. Shuttered at San Onofre nuclear power plant spewed liquid batches of radioactive influence into the ocean. Every nuclear plant that's on the ocean or Great Lakes or rivers does that constantly. Every nuclear power plant also has incinerators. These are scumbags. These are the enemy of every species. These are the biggest threats to the existence of humanity, is the stupid piece of shit nuclear. The little secret of nuclear power at the bottom of the landfill, they just dump it in all the local landfills in the 50s, 60s, and 70s under the secrecy laws. And you know, the secrecy laws for Canada and the secrecy laws for the United States, here's how this worked. They had, during the Manhattan Project, for instance, not just only the Manhattan Project, but during the Manhattan Project, they had tens of thousands of spies spying on the scientists. And they had tens of thousands of more spies spying on the spies that were spying on the scientists. And they had hundreds of thousands of whistleblowers that were taken out or jailed. It's unbelievable. And now that particular Secrecy Act has never went away. Today that's still going on. Because it's a big chunk of money taken out of the taxpayers. It's hush money because it's a secret operation. And they never gave that up. Coalition seeks an extra $7.25 billion for Department of Energy nuclear cleanup. Do you got any idea what you can do with $7.25 billion in geothermal? Oh, another $6.4 billion U.S. nuclear cleanup contract. There's so many of these Superfund sites, and $6.4 billion, they're not going to do jack shit. 90% of the money, by the way, goes to administration. Oh, here's a happy story. The UK, Scotland, Donerae, which is UK owned, but it's in Scotland, they can't go near the site for 300 years. It'll take 300 years to clean it up because it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine, clearly. It's a stupid industry, isn't it? Homeless and the migrant workers exploited to clean up the Fukushima radiation. The homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants that don't speak the language. That's your heroes. That's the people we should covet. In 1986, a Russian submarine with 26 nuclear missiles sank. Don't worry, Dan, it'll take 1,000 years for the whole rush, just because the nuclear industry built it, so therefore it's superior to everything. I mean, these are revolting parasites. How can you not call these people revolting parasites? Them and the Jews, I don't know which one is worse. The Soviet Union, I mean, they wiped out Gaza. They flattened Gaza and said they were going after Hamas. They didn't even try to kill Hamas. They destroyed a country and blamed it. Like, they created Hamas, for goodness sakes, so they would have someone to demonize. The Soviet Union detonated a nuclear bomb to put out a burning gas well This is how stupid this industry actually is. Like, this is an idiot industry. Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, Westinghouse Waltz Mill test reactor. Test reactor melted down. Test reactor in Pennsylvania where the 3 Mile Island is still. But because it wasn't a commercial reactor, it doesn't get counted, right? These are such scumbags. And that the resulting in a disposition of 2 million gallons of hideously radioactive water was generated. That was dumped. The atomic history of Christmas Island. They took Christmas Island, the British did. They took the Marshall Islands, where we got a study from 2019 where 1 million square kilometers is still too radioactive to be habitable in the Marshall Islands. They took the Montebello Maralinga in Australia. They took all these beautiful paradises and destroyed them permanently. These tropical paradises, unimaginable, gorgeous, stunning, temperature steady, just absolutely amazing. And these were the nurseries of the oceans too. And so they destroyed it all with radiation and nuclear weapons. I mean, they left so much nuclear waste in the Marshall Islands, in the most vulnerable spot conceivable. How can you not hate this industry? How does that work? Really, how does it work? The United States uses dirty bombs and calls them bullets and weapons. The A-10 Warthog only shoots dirty bombs. Studied into the question of disposing of 36 million dirty bombs. These are not coated and not tipped. These are pure uranium. This has gone through a chain reaction. It should make you sick to your guts. You can't dispose of this. You don't. These are sick people. This is a coward industry. NANO Nuclear Energy enters into agreement to acquire ultra-safe nuclear. We've been covering them since they existed, both of them. Ultra-safe nuclear. There's a special place in hell for these scumbags. They patented a Micro Modular Reactor that doesn't exist. You don't have a patent. You can't have a patent on something that don't exist. Like, in order to have a patent, you got to have a model, right? They don't have a model. $8.5 million went in a fire sale. I despise nano nuclear. I absolutely despise them because they're out there robbing mom and pop investors, millions of them, of their life savings who actually worked for a living. Unlike the degenerate ultra safe and nano nuclear who never done nothing only steal people's life savings. Why are they allowed on the stock market? Really? They're anti-human, anti-species. Mini nuclear power station may produce more waste than larger ones. Mini nuclear stations may produce more waste than larger ones. Naturally less efficient, researchers find. They found that the small modular reactors could increase the volume of short-lived, low and intermediate level waste compared to high level waste. Short level is like 10,000 years. The lowest of three categories by up to 35 times. For long-lived equivalent waste, the small modular reactors would produce up to 30 times more waste than a conventional reactor, and that it would produce and spend fuel 5 times more. But we're talking about much worse than that because we're talking about mixed oxide fuel, plutonium mixed oxide fuel. So, like an animosity equivalent, it would be like 60 times more because it's so lethal. The emissions because it's still splitting atoms for thousands and thousands of years. Japanese town faces a waste dilemma amid population decline. A nuclear waste facility will harm the community and leave a legacy of radioactive waste in a nuclear wasteland on top of that. On Thursday, residents of a small town found themselves at the center of a national controversy that attracted news helicopters and television crews to their usually sleepy streets. Yeah, because the media doesn't exist anymore. It's a tool now weaponized against the 8 million species and humans. Well, if they volunteer to, like the Japan Nuclear Waste Management Organization / NUMA, nut job, as I think is what they're trying to say, was searching for a town willing to host a large underground facility to store the country's nuclear waste. Like sticking it down the ground, eventually it melts down. Eventually it cracks the earth open, and eventually the earth dies from the emissions. That's the reality of a deep geological repository. You just simply, if you leave it alone, it will melt down. And then it doesn't need oxygen to burn, see? So it'll just consume everything. Eventually it'll hit water, and water will detonate like a bomb. And the earth will split wide open, and the emissions will never stop going out. And then every time it rains, it gets worse. However, there were stipulations. It could not be near a seismically active fault line or a volcano, which excludes Japan, don't it? And it could not contain valuable natural resources like coal or aquifers. All nuclear plants are built over aquifers, for goodness sakes. It has to be within 12 miles of the coast for safe waste transport. It's a joke. This nuclear industry is not, though, because it'll destroy everything. Everything on the planet at some point. Turkey plans to build 3 nuclear power plants by 2035. France is, who's going to build their plant? They're not going to build their own plant. So it's going to be France. And France's recent nuclear plant just came online last week. Is 12 years behind schedule and 4 times over budget. And by the way, Turkey is one of the best spots for geothermal on the planet. And for the money, they can build 4 times more geothermal energy, have 4 times the gigawatts as they would on stupid idiot nuclear. Plans to build 3 nuclear power plants in the country by 2035. How are you going to do that? There's no supply stream anyway for the equipment, first off. There's not enough companies. South Korea ain't going to be building it. Their nuclear renaissance is gone down the drain. So who else is going to build it? France is supposed to build 8 of their own. If they build 8 of their own, they can't build anything for Turkey. Russia's not going to build it. Russia can't keep it all the memorandums of understandings that they're already committed to. Nuclear waste, what is it and how do we dispose of it? Oh, this guy. He's a playwright. So why is he writing about nuclear? He writes plays. And he's got this story written of the perfect propaganda. We cover it all the time, right? There's no way that shit for brains wrote it. Right? The International Atomic Energy Agency writes a story, gives it to shit for brains. David, the moron, who's a playwright, and then he sells it as if it's his, it's absurd. Oh, he's from Washington, Seattle, where all the pro-nuclear scumbags hang out. Fall puts nuclear power station offline over Christmas. Is this one James was talking about earlier? The Haysom or something? Looks like I didn't screen capture the extra headline or the extra paragraph. Why Amazon, Microsoft, and Google and Meta are investing in nuclear power. Yeah, they're investing in small modular reactors that don't exist. It artificially inflated the stocks, and people, thousands if not millions of people lost their life savings in stocks because they bought stocks of a company that has no product. Right? They got sucked in by the propaganda. And every one of them should have class action lawsuits against Amazon, Microsoft, and Alphabet / Google. And stupid Meta. With minimal emissions. What are you talking about? You don't even have an application into the regulatory agency. You can't quantify that. Investing in the reactors that don't exist. Big tech's bet on nuclear power. So they got a video of just nothing but pure propaganda. I appreciate the focus on debunking old fears about nuclear power, said the public relation firm. Nuclear power makes so much sense, says the public relation firm. Halting progress on it was stupid and set the transition to clean energy back by decades. There's literally nobody on the planet would write a sentence like that, only a public relation radio seeker. I'm glad the increased energy demands surrounding big tech and AI is getting the recognition it deserves, says the Moto shit for brain. Excuse the Canadian. Nefer says new nuclear is the most expensive solution for decarbonization. Small modular reactors work only in PowerPoints. Did he just call 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl benign accidents? Yeah, it's media. Their job is to destroy your future and your life. Mr. Sherlock says, if I was a billionaire, I'd invest in nuclear too. It's safe and cleaner than anything else. And the nuclear waste is used for A-10 warthogs. I love that statement, actually. The A-10, I showed you that earlier, right? They're trying to get rid of 36 rounds for the A-10 warthogs. Yes, nuclear is very safe. Just ask the people who used to live near Chernobyl or Fukushima. And then they have these bizarre, just money flowing into a reactor, which is the only true story, part of the entire story. And then TerraPower and Google and Meta and Amazon and Microsoft. Like, there is no small modular reactors. It must come to a shock to anybody that bought into it, because this is how they sell it, right? Dana Durnford, I left a comment to shit for brains up there. Here are some headlines after Fukushima. The video conveniently omitted. And you can see Japan's National Cancer Center says number of cancer patients rose 865,000 in 2012, a year after Fukushima. Very high concentrations of hot particles in the Pacific Northwest after April and May included plutonium and americium. Uninterrupted line of radiation stretches across the Pacific. Uninterrupted. Xenon-133 in Washington, 450,000 times above detection levels post-Fukushima. Rain with 20 million particles, iodine-131. And they took that down. That didn't make it. Radiation monitor fails during internal air discharges at the Hanbit nuclear power plant. Is that South Korea? I think that's internal. During internal air discharges. They don't air discharge internal radiation into the buildings. What kind of moron would write something like that? Yeah, this was South Korea. The Hanbit nuclear power plant, the red circle in the photo, is Unit 6. Nuclear Safety Security Commission reported on the 27th, 2 days ago, that it received a report from the Korean Hydro Nuclear Power Corporation about the discharge of internal air from the contaminated building of Unit 6. Internal air. 6 times between October the 8th and the 10th without passing through the radiation monitors installed at the exhaust. Really, how do you do that, though? Korea Hydro Nuclear Power Corporation reported that analysts of samples taken before the discharge confirmed it was within the normal operating range. Because they're always releasing radiation, see? And so they just keep raising the considered acceptable doses. An investigation team composed of experts from the Korean Atomic Energy Safety Technology Institute is going to be dispatched. Why would you send them over? They're the worst humans conceivable. They're the most worthless creatures on the planet, sure. They're the monsters that got us into this problem in the first place. 2 fighter jets over the United States observed carrying nuclear bombs models. Well, how do you know they're models? Maybe they're bombs that look like models, right? Up to 50 kilotons. Hiroshima was 15 kilotons. Look up pictures of the damage from that bad boy. NANO Nuclear Energy shares are down 6.2%. Why do they have stocks when they don't even have a product? All they're doing is robbing all the unsuspecting investors. So here's how they're doing it. I'm going to show you coming up, actually. So H.C. Wainwright restated a buy rating and set a $50 target price. Stocks trade as low as $26. That's recent, right? The average, I think, is $18. They were saying it's going to be worth $50, up to $66. But they have a 50-day moving average of $24, a 200-day moving average of $18. They don't have a product. They're decades away from a product. So the hedge funds, we know some of them pulled out of it. And we know there's 14 of them are dumping the investors' money into the stocks. And so they got a small breakdown. Large investors, which are the big portfolio stocks. NANO Nuclear Energy Incorporated operates as a micro reactor technology company that doesn't have a product. Right, they have XTX Topco Limited purchased $300,000. State Street Corporation had a quarter $718,000. Oh, there it is. Citizens Financial Group boosted its holding in NANO Nuclear Energy. So what happens is the hedge funds, the big investments, there's 14 of them. We covered that on Friday's show. They'll buy these shares that'll artificially raise the price. Then mom and pops will come and invest. The prices will go up, and then they'll sell their shares. Then the bottom falls out. Mom and pops lost all their money. Nano got their money back. Went up a little bit, and this is how they're doing that every 3 weeks or so. And I've done a detailed show on that on Friday, without so much colorful language, of course. Copal Greens oppose a nuclear plant, and they put the N word there, look, N plants. They didn't have the courage to put the word nuclear there. I despise people like that, by the way. Near a bear sanctuary in a monolithic site, an archaeological site. And that's one of the biggest aquifers in the country. Freshwater aquifers. Farmers, social activists, ecologists, history lovers have opposed a survey to set up a nuclear disease factory near the bear sanctuary and monolithic sites. It's nuclear, but they don't even put the word nuclear in the headline. How can you do that? Because these are cowards. That's what the journalist is a coward, right? Environmentalists and farmers raise concerns of the impacts of wildlife, human settlements, and the reservoirs. It's one of the biggest. I looked at one of the biggest reservoirs in that part of the country, or that country rather. U.S. Long Beach, first nuclear cruiser to change the naval warfare forever. And if it had sunk, then you'd have one of the biggest environmental catastrophes on the planet. How can you be, like, how can they constantly be evil? Well, because everybody's evil in the industry. That's how come. If everybody's evil, it seems normal then, right? They feel normal. Well, he's evil too, so don't worry about it. Is nuclear power the dirtiest, most resource-intensive, dangerous, and have the evilest people employed? Duh. And some of them are calling this beautiful for some reason. A beautiful ship. It's a weapon of mass destruction. What's so freaking beautiful about that? Your parents must be idiots. There you go. 16 naval ships with timeless beauty. How can you call a weapon of mass destruction beautiful? Only pro-nuclear can do it, see? Energy Minister Chris Bowen responds to the coalition's nuclear plan. This is Australia. He had 3 fatal areas. Peter Dutton is an idiot. It's a huge risk to Australia energy system and a huge risk to Australia. And he's 100% correct for saying it. Excuse me. Oh, that's right. I can turn the volume down. I forget sometimes, All the crazies. They never take a day off, this industry. MP calls for a vote on Holderness nuclear site, which locals brand a hazardous waste dumping ground. This is United Kingdom, I believe, yeah. Got a frog in the throat, and a frog in the throat. It means that South Holderness has joined 3 other places being considered for such a facility, along with the East Lindsay area, Lincolnshire, and 2 locations in Columbia, which is a nuclear wasteland and where they have cancer clusters among the children. But get a load of it, they're going to build it out under the ocean. Eventually it melts down and the ocean is destroyed. Well, the ocean's already destroyed anyway from nuclear, but then that's forever if that ever melts down. And you know it's going to melt down. You can't isolate it because it doesn't need oxygen to burn. It'll chew through anything close to it and it'll ignite all the other fuel. Then you have a massive volcanic activity will melt through the rest of it. So that's the 3 boats we used for research expeditions for 6 years. And we'd done from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And what we discovered were the shellfish and the fish and the sea urchins and the sea stars and everything else. The 7,000 species, the 480 species of worms, not counting the 5,500 invertebrates without the backbones and the 700 algae, are all disappeared. But the 27,000 islands that are up there have sand beaches. The sand is made from shellfish, breaking down over millenniums, right? What I found really interesting was there was no shells on the beaches. They were gone. And so how can you have 27,000 islands, and each island with multiple beautiful golden sand beaches without any shellfish? And that's what the beaches were made of. Okay, so that's important for the next part of the story that I'm going to tell you. Here we go. Just give me a second. So James Lucid, who's been producing an incredible amount of just amazing music. It's just came out with a new song. The Lost Shells official video. He does all the graphics too, right? It's all with AI. So we're going to close the poll down. Is nuclear power, and then we're going to play that song for you. It's a wonderful song. I hope you stay around and listen to it. I hope you subscribe to his website. Is nuclear power the dirtiest? And there's links in my description at the bottom of the stories tonight. You'll see a link to his music. Is nuclear power, and you also see I got a playlist now with his songs into it. I'm starting to add his music. Is nuclear power the dirtiest, most resource-intensive, dangerous, and have the evilest people employed? And we have oh, yeah, that's what it is. Let me get out of this. Over to here. We'll close that down. We're going to play that song for you. That's a great song. I know you're going to enjoy it. And James doesn't... he doesn't make very many mistakes at all now. Every song is a guaranteed winner. There's many different genres too. And this is another one of them. And here we go. Any moment now. We'll bring it up for you. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. You have a great day. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. It's very difficult for me to do the things I'm doing. And so one of the ways to support me is to share my videos. And we'll see you on the next show. Take care, everybody.
Remain just garbage and sand. Ocean's bed, stripped and bare. Where life once grew, now nothing there. What refuge now in a wave so cold? With sands unbound, history told. A pill bottle shell, brittle gray, left adrift in lost decay. The